Now I am delighted to introduce our opening keynote panel for today. This panel is on a very exciting topic, the top questions the board will ask you, and how can you prepare for them. Moderating this panel is Sabarinathan, Sampath, Chief Strategy Officer, Wire19, a venture of ZNet Technologies. And joining Sabari today are panel contributors Anthony Dayrit from Integrated Health Information Systems, Yaron Slutzky, CISO Agoda, Sam Ung, Director of Enterprise Security, Crypto.com, and Parag Deodhar, Director Information Security Asia Pacific, VF Corporation. Over to you, Sabari.
Hello, good morning all. Thank you for joining in for this session today. I'm Sabarinathan Sampath, Chief Strategy Officer with Y19. We are a media house, a part of ZNet Technologies, a cloud distributor with specialist focus on cybersecurity solutions. I'm absolutely delighted to be in the midst of eminent set of panelists today to be talking about a very happening important topic, which is relating to cybersecurity and also some new security models which are evolving. And I'm going to be asking a lot of questions which we typically receive from audiences like you about some of these things. So before we get deeper into the discussions, let me get the panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'll set the context for the discussions going forward. We'll get started with Yaron yourself. Yaron, go to you, please.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being part of the panel. So my name is Yaron Slutzky. I'm located here in Thailand. Currently, I'm the CISO for Agoda, the travel industry. My background is mostly coming from different industries like telecom, e-commerce, manufacturing, and glad to be a part today.
Thank you, Yaron. Then we'll go on to Sam. Over to you, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sam. I'm based in Hong Kong. I am the Director of Enterprise Security in Crypto.com. So my background is actually application security. And now I basically try my best to protect the company, which is a very challenging role.
I'm sure it is. Thank you, Sam. I'm glad to have you here. Anthony, over to you, please.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So my name is Anthony. I am the technical ISO in IHiS. IHiS is the IT tech arm for Singapore for healthcare. And I'm also wearing the Singapore chapter for ISC Squared as the director for volunteer and outreach. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Anthony. Parag, over to you, please.
Hi, thanks, Sabri. Good morning, everyone. My name is Parag Deodhar, and I'm the director for information security at VF Corp in Asia. I come from a risk management background. I'm currently based in Hong Kong. Great to be here and talking to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Parag. Glad to have you here. We have a tour representation from Southeast Asia, and very good to see that there is a wider representation across different industry segments as well. I'm sure we're going to get some exciting inputs from the panelists. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Just to set the context for the discussions as such, cybersecurity is very much relevant in this current day and age where a lot of organizations are going digital, they're turning everything into electronic ways of working, processing, etc. So, that certainly has given rise to a lot of adoption of new tools, techniques, devices, etc. as well. At the same time, this also potentially has increased the security risk in terms of some of these devices being used, etc. as well. And to ensure some of these are secure, new security models are evolving as well to be able to help keep on top of some of these new things which was happening. One of the new models what has popped up is Zero Trust security model. And what we're going to be talking today is for CISOs and IT security heads who are there in this particular discussion, who are listening in, it is about how do you answer some of the questions which, let's say, a board or leadership team asks you? Is this the model which we should be adopting? Is this secure? And how much money should I be putting on to be able to help us secure us as an organization? How are my customers secure? These are some of the typical questions which a board member would be asking. And in this forum, in this panel, we will be discussing, getting insights and inputs from some of the experts who are here with us, sharing their insights, and I'm sure you will find them interesting, and you may apply some of them in your day-to-day life as well, right? So without much further ado, let's get going with this, right? So first of all, let's demystify this term. What is the zero trust, right? When somebody from the board asks you, how is the zero trust going to secure our organization? What is the zero trust and how is this going to secure? We'll probably start with Parag first, and we'll go around the table. Parag, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks. Very, very good question. And no, definitely it's a challenge for CISOs who come from a technical background to explain to the board members who are probably non-technical, most of them at least, and to explain them in a layman term or a term which they understand about technical terms like zero trust, right? So to me, I would try to explain to them in a way that zero trust is not a shiny new tool, but it's a framework. It's a combination of tools, processes, and people, which is used to provide access to the company's data and network and the assets, IT assets, in a way that they are continuously validated, for and authenticated and authorized, for the security configuration, the security posture, so to reduce the risk of data breaches, reduce the risk of any IT incidents, and increase the security posture or bring the security posture of the company to an acceptable level.
Gotcha. Thank you, Parag. I think that helps to understand it is a framework. It is not some software which anyone is going to use as such. It's a combination of tools, process, and procedures, and along with the community people as well. So thank you for that, Parag. Sam, would you want to take a stab at it? Would you do anything different in terms of explaining this as such?
Yep. And I have to confess, the first time I heard about zero trust, I think, hey, this is a marketing buzzword and I don't like it. It will not help us. But then the more I understand it, I think it's to the right direction. So yeah, we will probably never be able to have zero trust, but I think we need to minimize the trust, right? From fully trust to, okay, we do a lot of more checks, right? So right nowadays, you allow people to use the communication system, no matter it is email or Slack or whatever, right? So you allow them to use it on the desktop doesn't mean that you always should allow them to use it on a mobile phone. But this is one of the concepts, right? So and even in the past, like you VPN to the network, then basically you're in the network, then you are able to access anything. Well, as long as you have username and password, right? But this doesn't necessarily should be the case, right? So you log into the VPN doesn't mean that you can use the financial system or you can use the HR system, right? So we should have these kind of granular control, not just all or nothing. And in order to do that, and authentication is quite heavily emphasized in zero trust. And do you have a unified SSO or user database that you can rely on? If no, then okay, when you VPN is using this pair of username, password, and it's static. And then when you access the financial system, you are using another pair of username, password. And how do we make sure that these are actually the same user? So I think these are the things that we are trying to do. It's really not just not product per se, right? It's more about the concept, strategies, and methodologies that how you should run and protect the network.
Gotcha. Understood. Sam, Yaron, anything you want to add on top of what Parag and Sam mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So I think that what we need to take into account is that I think the environments and the world change, right? We also see these days with COVID and everything that, they're working from home in the last, let's say, 2 years. So the environment and the attack surface have changed, okay? So because of that, let's say the zero trust model got more, let's say, enforcement on companies to adopt, because it helps, everyone today have bring your own device, they're using probably their personal use, of laptops or mobile phones or stuff like that, but you still want to give them the ability to work, right, with their personal devices, because the business is more important to continue working, but you want to do it in a secure way, right? So the zero trust, let's say, method was basically made up in just to show that we don't trust anyone anymore, but we want to verify that it's actually them and they can actually do what they're supposed to do with the limited, let's say, access, secure way, audit, trackable, and to make sure that only what they need to do is being done.
Understood. Thank you, gentlemen. I think that really helps to demystify this to some degree for sure. If we move on to the next question, so now that we've clarified what is the zero trust, etc., and it requires continual authentication, validation, etc., right? If we implement zero trust, are we really safe, right? Because the board will typically have this question, hey guys, you come up with these buzzwords all the time, new technology, you need certain millions to invest, etc. But how do I be assured that, if we implement this, are we safe, right? How do you all get that question answered? And how do we get that as a thing which I would like to implement going forward in any future projects as well? Anthony, what is your take on this, and how do you go about getting this to the board?
Well, definitely that's one of the questions, that are we 100% safe when we implement zero trust framework or approach? Well, maybe we could explain it to the management in a way that this is just a subset of the whole security approach that we're going to implement in the company. When we say zero trust, right? So we basically, in a nutshell, saying, how do we provide access from one system to another? So it's not really 100%, we could say, a bulletproof or a silver bullet for security. I think that's just my take for this point.
Okay, understood. Sam, do you want to have a go at this? Are we really safe kind of question, which typically a board member asks you, how do you counter that?
Okay, so I think my take for whether if we implement zero trust, whether we are safe, I think the answer is, of course, no, right? But if we don't, probably we are at a high risk. I don't think zero trust is a silver bullet, and then as long as we do it, then no hack will happen. But come on, if we do granular control, would that be doing better than doing 0 or 1? Obviously, it's better. And I think it's in the past, we are not emphasizing that granular control and then doing more verification. And then now it's about, everybody is talking about that. And obviously, there must be a reason. And then we probably should do it, right? So I think it's more about the trade-off and then the time and money. I think it's not just about product, right? So it's like, if we want to have more granular control on what you can access, come on, then we need to have a mean to set the rules, right? We need to spend more time on account setup. And like if you access the cloud technology, then maybe in the past, everybody is like an administrator, let's say, I hope this is not the case, but if you want least privilege, granular control, someone needs to set up the IAM roles and policy. It takes time. So in the past, maybe not everybody is talking about that, not everybody is doing that, but obviously if you implement it properly, the least privilege, that sort of concept obviously is better. But in the past, maybe we don't have the time and money, and then not everybody is doing that. But I think now everybody is doing that and talking about that.
Thank you, Sam. I think you touched upon a couple of important topics about granular privilege, identifying roles of users, and giving them the right level of access depending on what is needed to do their job. Right? So I think that's if somebody is asking for access, just because we don't have any other access, give them admin access, gone are those days under the zero trust model, right? So that's primarily what you're emphasizing. Thank you. Insightful thoughts there. Parag, would you want to add anything on top of what the other two gentlemen mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think Anthony and Sam have given a good perspective. I'll just add something, in terms of the risk quantification for the board, because the board generally wants to understand numbers. There's no point talking to them about security jargon, which will probably put them off. So instead, I would sort of advise the CISOs to go with a little bit of a risk quantification methodology, or talking about risks and controls. So if we, as Yaron mentioned, we are currently at a heightened risk due to work from home scenarios, people working from outside, accessing applications from outside office, people accessing applications on the cloud, etc. So if we give that context to the board of, what is the risk level of the organization in terms of access to applications, in terms of possibilities or likelihood of breaches, data breaches, or IT incidents, ransomware attacks, and so on. And then provide a context of what the current controls are in place and how they are probably not sufficient to mitigate the risk of this heightened risk in the current scenario. And then what are the additional controls required, which can be fulfilled by the Zero Trust framework, which will help mitigate this risk or bring down this risk again to a certain level, acceptable level within the risk appetite. If we are able to provide this kind of a picture to the board, I think this will sort of be a good explanation to the board and get the right support from the board in terms of implementing the Zero Trust framework, what the CISOs are trying to do.
Nice. Well said, Parag. So you're focusing more on risk quantification, the remedial measures and the controls, what you would put to minimize that, and explain to the board that we are covering our exposure like this. So I think that's a very nice way of putting it as well. Yaron, would you want to add anything on this one topic?
I would just add and summarize what the other people said, but I would say that first, as a company, you need to understand what are the risks that are relevant to your company, right? And according to that, to build the right, infrastructure or security tooling or products to make sure that you are reducing the risks that exist in your environment, right? Because it could be, like usually you have, different companies that are fully on cloud, or we have hybrid, or we have that they are totally on-prem, right? So the attack surface might be a little bit different. It could be changed. The risks are different. So you need to understand exactly what is actually relevant to your company and build the right, maturity or posture of your security stack.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said there as well, right? And one of the things I think, Parag, you may have mentioned earlier is, we have this, people, process, and the tools, right? So these are the three broader things what we typically talk about all the time. And more often, the weakest link in the whole chain is mainly the people aspect of it, right? So you can, they may not necessarily be aware of what they're doing and leave, expose the entire organization at risk in a lot of scenarios, right? In this particular context of zero security, how do you go about identifying who is that person who is not a risk, who is at a lower risk, who is at a high risk, etc. And how do you rank them based on their ability to be able to expose the organization to that higher risk category, right? And also, how do you get this explained in a more non-technical to more non-technical people and leaders as well? Because as you quite rightly said, I think Parag, you mentioned that we have to not use technical jargons, but be in a position to be able to simplify the language for people to understand that their action, what they're doing is implicitly exposing the organization to a much broader risk, right? So going back to the question, who isn't at risk, who is a low risk, who is a high risk? How do you go about classifying this? Anthony, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, exactly, right. So one approach that we could probably do is to, for us to understand and identify who or what is at risk, is to definitely, conduct a gap or risk assessment. And when I say gap assessment, I'm going back to what Parag mentioned in terms of people, processes, and understanding exactly what technology we currently have in place. And then perhaps we can then start answering questions. Do we know exactly what are the methods of access currently, being granted to our users internally? Do we have a solution, for example, to provide granular access and controls, not just to users, but applications talking to another application or server talking to another server? So do we have implemented, or did we implement MFA, for example? So this is just a sample of a checklist that we could probably go through. And then the goal is for us to then identify who and what are at risk. I think this is one suggestion I could probably share today.
Cool, got you. Thank you. Parag, what is your perspective on this? How do we go about identifying this?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Anthony. I think starting with a risk assessment is always the best way, because that will give a whole perspective and the context to the board as to what we are talking about in terms of risk. What is really at risk for the organization, because there are a number of applications, there are a number of devices from which these applications are being accessed. There will be server-to-server communication and so on, right? So all this needs to be protected. But why does it need to be protected? What is actually at risk? What can go wrong? That is what will come out of this risk assessment, and will also help us, in prioritizing what needs to be protected first. What are the processes which needs to be prioritized or re-engineered to protect the data or protect the company? So doing this risk assessment definitely makes sense, and that will help you doing this classification of risk, ranking or prioritization of risk, which will also help in choosing the right tools which can mitigate those risks, choosing the right process, and also from a people front, training the people on how to access, what to access, etc. So that definitely is something which we need to do.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Parag, for those insights. Sam, any thoughts on how do we go about identifying these people who are at a low risk, high risk, or who are not at risk at all?
I think there's always a group of people that it will come out of your head immediately if you think, oh, who is that high risk? And then probably is the privileged users. But except for that, I do agree that you need to do a formal risk analysis. To be honest, there's so many systems that you don't know. But when you really try to do an audit and then see what kind of information that it reveals, maybe you get shocked. So I think it's still the same. You really need to understand where your data is, what kind of data you have stored in there, and then to solve the problem in there. But of course, I know there's always some people that, it's those 5 people. But to be honest, on the other hand, those 5 people maybe are the kind of people that you are more closely work with. They're more senior people, and then you know them for maybe many years. But there are also some other risks that you are not aware of. So I think I agree that we need to look at the problem in a more systematic way.
Cool. Adopting a holistic review and a systematic risk assessment based approach can help identify these stakeholders who are exposing the organization to that kind of risks. Absolutely. Yaron, any other different perspective you have on this?
Yeah, I would say that in these days, as we're using some technologies and we want to understand what's the risk about those users. So we're using, what we call either user behavior analytics or machine learning or AI to understand and trying to learn according to the actual uses of what users are actually using, and to see which ones are actually at risk, right? Because it could be a risk on demand. It's not necessarily to be that he's always a risk 365 days a year, right? So you need to understand and work with the data, and that you have the actual visibility about your user or identities that are using the systems or using the applications or the data, that nothing is out of the ordinary, right? No suspicious activity is being done, and then you need to trigger it as as a high risk user. So the one thing that I will add is work with the actual data, with the technologies, the visibility that you need to have in order to determine who are actually a high risk to the organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. So if we move on to the next topic, which is revolving around money, right? The board is interested in about how much are you going to charge me for this particular project, what you want to initiate. That's typically a question which CISOs and IT security leaders are asked all the time, right? And how it will impact, the ROI, or how much ROI can I expect out of it? That's typically a question what any business leader would ask, right? So Sam, how do you go about countering such questions around budgeting, maintenance costs which are involved, etc.?
First of all, I don't want to talk about money because every company is different. You need to find your way to get the budget. But I want to mention that when we talk about cost, it's not just about money. It's also about you probably need to add more people to, like the examples that I've talked about. If you want to do a granular approach in let's say setting up the IAM, you need to write that. You need to spend time and money. People's time to set up the IAM policy, and it will make the whole thing more complicated. And it's not just about the time and efforts that we as security team, as security people need to set up, because it will impact those people as well. Let's say a developer. In the past, I can do everything, and now I can only do this, and then I want to do one more thing, and it doesn't work. And they would disappoint, and then they would come back to us, and then we need to, now you need this capability. Let's add it to your profile as well. And then these back and forth will have costs as well. So it's operating costs, how you balance the two, how you make the so-called least privilege to be really workable is also something that we need to consider.
Yeah, very true. Because some of these things take time, but at the same time, it is helping you to become a lot more secure as an organization, right? So that's the thing we have to justify to the board as such. Anthony, you want to have a go at this question about budgeting and costs, etc.?
Yeah, I've been actually thinking about this, and this is one of my favorite discussions every time I go to the board, right? And as I always say, we have the tendency to buy the shiny new toys out there, right? Speaking about AI, user behavior analysis, and whatnot. But what I'll probably suggest here is we always go back to the risk-based approach. Right. Ultimately, we go back. What exactly is our goal in implementing the Zero Trust framework? Maybe if I could summarize it in one sentence, right? We wanted to have this framework to enable us, the organization, to reduce risks, right? While also improving two things: governance and also compliance. So when we do the risk-based approach, we will then be able to identify what are our regulatory requirements, what is our legal obligations and contractual obligations as well, right? And I think I'm not sure if Yaron or Sam mentioned about automating stuff, right? So one way for us also to present it to the management is in terms of risk-based approaches. How do we quantify in terms of automating? Are we like manually reviewing access logs? Are we manually reviewing, access attempts? So having the Zero Trust automatically be in place, we can then be able to also defend and explain to the management what are the value of implementing Zero Trust in our environment, not just having, those shiny new tools out there.
Absolutely, because more often people expect to have some big equipment outside the office to say, yes, this is zero secure, equipment which we have purchased as a part of this particular project as such, right? So more often it's not about that. It's more about, ensuring that we have done a proper assessment of our controls in place, etc. Absolutely. Yaron, do you want to add anything on top of what the other three gentlemen mentioned here?
Yeah, what I would add is that obviously, as I mentioned, each company have their own budget and their own, let's say, roadmaps and goals, right? And we're building our roadmap according to it. So we ask for the budget, because we think that this project is relevant, to the company from a business justification, security justification. So we need to actually do it accordingly to our roadmap and goals. Okay. Second, I believe eventually that with the right, let's say, a zero trust approach, you can eventually show ROI of the benefits of the actually developers or your employees, that they need to work, let's say, more easy, more scalable, anytime from anywhere. So with the zero trust approach, it will make their life eventually easier, and they can do much more work, okay, or much more productivity, let's say, to doing their job. So eventually you can actually prove that it's worth the investment, because eventually your employees will do a better job. They will have less complaint or less complexity on how to access this or this, and everything will be in a very, as Anthony mentioned, is automated, trackable, logged way.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Parag. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I like the approach of Yaron, what he said, showing the positive side as well, not just the negative side of, what can go wrong and what could be the cost of a breach, but also showing the productivity side, how we can improve the productivity of the employees, etc. But I think it's also important for CISOs to work closely with the finance team and the operational risk team in this specific aspect of budgeting, because they can help you a lot in terms of quantifying the risk. What is the cost of data breach? What could be the impact in terms of reputation for the company, legal costs, and so on. And if that is not within the risk appetite of that company, then what is required to bring it within the risk appetite, and then the amount required, the budget required for the implementation of a zero trust framework to both reduce the risk as well as improve productivity, that can definitely help in getting CISOs the budget what they are looking for. And if they cannot get, always money is short, budgets are tight. So it also makes sense to have the prioritization ready to say that, okay, for implementing a full zero trust framework, we require these 10 aspects or 10 tools or process improvements, etc. But if we have only X amount of budget left or available, then these are the top 5 things I would like to prioritize, which would bring it down to this level, which is much closer to the acceptable level.
Right, but I think breaking it down into a little bit more smaller chunk to see how much of risk exposure you're limiting yourself to, right? So that certainly could be a good way as well. Thank you, Parag. That's very helpful. No conversation about the security is complete without discussing about what if scenario. What if that breach, which we thought we would prevent, has happened, whatever way it has happened, right? Does that mean that the zero trust approach has failed? Does that mean that we have to drop that idea and look for something else? Parag, I'll start with you and then more on the table. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, as I think we've all mentioned earlier, there's no such thing as 100% security. There's always a chance that something could go wrong, and we live in a very dynamic environment. We see 0 days coming out every day. The latest tool or the latest product which you implement might have a 0 day, coming out the very next day or the very next week. So there's always this requirement to keep up to date, keep patching, keep making sure that you continuously evaluate your risks and continuous monitoring of these risks, and making sure these controls are being updated as and when these risks change or the environment changes. That's something which we so zero trust is not a point in time solution, right? Once you implement, doesn't mean that you're safe for the next 1 year or 6 months or whatever. No, it has to be improved on a day-to-day basis. It has to be monitored on a day-to-day basis. I think this is something which needs to be communicated very clearly to the board as well when you are implementing this zero trust framework, that it's not a silver bullet. There will be changes happening. The environment is changing. The business is changing. There are new applications coming every day. So whatever we implemented yesterday may not be enough for tomorrow. So that's something which has to be made clear to the board, and we need to, and that's why we need to keep updating the board on a regular basis as well.
Absolutely. I mean, security is a very evolving topic. It changes by the day, and CISOs and IT leaders, have a very difficult task at hand to ensure that their organization is completely up to date with whatever they can. And obviously, communication, as you quite rightly said, this is very relevant as well. Right? Anthony, any thoughts on you on this?
Yeah, I fully agree, 100%. Maybe if one thing I'll probably add is I want to reiterate in the notion that having all these tools approach in place, it certainly, it takes time for us to go to a certain maturity level. And even if we reach that level, it doesn't mean that we have a silver bullet to protect on any adversities that we have out there. So one thing that we can probably do here is a clear communication with the board, with the senior management, that there are still uncertainties that this zero trust will definitely not be able to look at.
Cool. Thank you, Anthony. Yaron, anything from you?
Yeah, we just said that obviously when, if in the case of a breach that will happen in the future or happening right now, so zero trust is just another, eventually methodology or some tooling to help us be much more mature, from a security perspective. So eventually when we're presenting to the board, we are showing our maturity, right? How are we compare, to either the benchmark, to the industries, from security perspective, from a framework like NIST or other frameworks that we're using to show how we are doing, compared to, let's say, this year compared to previous years. So nothing will be 100% as we discussed before. So our job is to show that we are working to make sure that the maturity of the company is in progress. We are doing better. Of course, it will not save us, but even if it's something that will happen, we can actually show, the benefit or how much time it took us to contain it or reduce the actually damage that potentially could happen because we have those, implementation in place.
True, demonstrating adequate controls have reduced the impact as much as possible and the time frame to respond also. I think that's a nice way of putting it. Thank you, Yaron. Sam, I'm just conscious about time. We'll wrap up with you with that last response from your end. What if a security breach has happened? Does that mean everything has gone off? What are your thoughts?
I basically agree with others. I think there's no silver bullet, and we never get there. But so you're doing zero trust doesn't mean you are completely safe. This is all I can say.
Cool. But in the interest of time, probably I may take one question and maybe one response for somebody. But any of the panelists can respond to that. Right? For example, if as a part of this zero trust journey, you're probably looking for some third-party providers or some software or someone to help you along the way. And what do you typically look for in some of these providers, etc.? Anyone want to have a go at it? Probably about a minute to respond.
Maybe I'll take that. Just a quick one. Definitely look for someone that you can trust, partner with in your journey. And before you even look into who we will be partnering with, make sure you have the output of the risk-based assessment that you had. You use this as a use case, and then see how you can then implement this with the partners as you go along and deploy this with them.
Okay, cool. Anybody else who would want to have a go?
Yeah, we just add that obviously, very important to see which partner or which vendor you're going to go with. POC it before you actually go with full blow with this a solution. Make sure that it's fit to your needs, requirements, criteria that you had in the POC to make sure that it's actually what you want to do and what are your KPIs and goals to achieve with these solutions, vendors, or service that you're going with.
Cool. Last chance for you, Sam and Parag.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, I completely agree with what Yaron and Anthony said. No, yeah, again, as we said, Zero Trust is not just one single tool, right? It's a framework. It's going to be probably multiple tools, some of the existing tools, what you have, and some new tools which you might implement. So it's also important, as Yaron said, to do the POC, but also to see how they integrate well with each other. So that's something also which you need to think about. In terms of your existing landscape, IT landscape, and existing tools, and the new tools to integrate properly with each other.
Cool. Oh, cool. Okay. Sam, any thoughts from you?
If I have to make one suggestion, I think nowadays almost everybody is work from home. If you haven't upgrade or improve your VPN, you should. And now upgraded VPN means not after people log in, it's not zero or one, not nothing or all, right? And then when you do log in, you better have hardware authentication instead of just software. I think these are the things that nowadays most companies should implement.
Cool. Thank you. Just as a summary, I would want to. I've been hearing very insightful thoughts from the panelists today, talking about a risk-based approach to the overall zero trust solution. How do we go about assigning, looking at granular privileges? It obviously takes time, but at the same time, it helps you to protect you as an organization. That's an investment which the organization will have to make. But if that helps the organization to reduce your risk exposure, and you quantify that in a positive way to the management to say that your productivity is going to increase this way, and if that helps to translate from a revenue perspective to this, and that's pretty much what the board would also want to hear as well, right? So I think in a very fascinating insights from all of you gentlemen, and I'm sure our audience would have also grabbed quite a lot of insightful thoughts from all of you, and I'm sure I did. With that said, I think we've come up to the end of this discussion. Thank you all for joining in today, and thank you to the eminent panelists as well with me today. Thank you, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you, Sabari, Anthony, Yaron, Sam, and Parag for your great insights and strategies on talking to the board about Zero Trust.